In the spring of 1860, a powerful tornado struck Alton, Illinois, causing widespread damage across the town and destroying several buildings, including St. Mary's Catholic Church, a young parish church that had only recently been built. This event is an early example of severe tornado activity in the Midwest, occurring several years before the development of modern tornado documentation and forecasting. Here is a brief historical background of Alton in 1860. Alton was a growing Mississippi River town with a diverse population and several active religious congregations by 1860. The city had a number of church buildings that played central roles in community life. St. Mary's Catholic Church, officially known as the Church of the Immaculate Conception, was founded to serve the German-speaking immigrant population. The parish constructed its first church building between late 1858 and the spring of 1859. This initial structure included church space on the second floor and living rooms and classrooms on the first, reflecting both religious and educational purposes. On June 2, 1860, in the early evening, a severe tornado struck the western part of Alton. It brought heavy rain and hail, and within about 20 minutes it left significant destruction in its path. The storm damaged hundreds of structures in Alton. Notably, the Episcopal and Methodist churches lost their steeples. Offices of the Alton Democrat newspaper were demolished. St. Mary's Church was destroyed by the tornado less than a year after its opening. The impact on St. Mary's Church was devastating. St. Mary's original building, completed only a few months earlier, was obliterated by the storm, leaving the young parish without its church and with outstanding debt from construction. The human consequences were severe. Historical accounts note that while there were extensive property losses, there were few reports of serious injuries from the tornado in Alton itself. Elderly accounts and parish records emphasize the destruction of property rather than the loss of life for this particular event. Here is an excerpt from the Telegraph, Alton, June 2, 1860 morning edition. A destructive storm struck the western section of Alton last evening near dusk. In a brief but violent display of wind, rain, and hail, hundreds of buildings were reported damaged. Several church steeples were torn down, and the offices of our esteemed Alton Democrat lie in ruin. Damage across the town is extensive. Reports of serious injury are few. Let us step quietly backward through the years and return to a time when Alton was still young, when the Mississippi carried more steamboats than memories, and when the sky itself seemed wider over the Illinois bluffs. It was an era before warning sirens, before weather maps traced the paths of storms, before the people of river towns had words like tornado season. Life moved with the rhythm of the river and the turning of the soil. Church bells marked the hours. Neighbors knew one another by name. Faith was not an ornament to life, it was its foundation. On a summer evening in 1860, that foundation was shaken. The day had given little hint of the violence to come. The air lay heavy, still in a way that made farmers uneasy and mothers restless without knowing why. Over the western horizon, clouds gathered with a strange purpose, dark upon dark, folding into shapes no one could name. Birds fell silent. The river seemed to pause in its flow. Then the wind began to rise. What followed was swift and terrible, a force of nature that tore across Alton with a sound survivors would later struggle to describe. Some called it a roar like 1,000 trains. Others said it was like the earth itself breaking apart. Homes were splintered, businesses shattered, and places of worship, the very symbols of constancy, were struck down. Among them stood St. Mary's Church, newly built by the hands of immigrant families who had given more than money to see it raised. They had given labor, hope, and the quiet belief that here at last they had found a permanent home. In a matter of moments, that house of prayer was reduced to ruin beneath the storm's fury. And yet, as we return in memory to that darkened sky and broken ground, we do not come only to witness destruction. We come to remember the people who stood afterward in the debris, who mourned what was lost, and who, with steady hands and steadfast faith, chose to build again. For the storm that struck Alton in 1860 was not only a tale of wind and wreckage, it was a solemn testament to endurance, to community, and to a faith that no tempest could carry away.
The river town of Alton stirred with the steady rhythm of frontier prosperity in the summer of 1860. Steamboats groaned along the Mississippi's muddy current, wagons rattled over packed dirt streets, and church bells marked the hours of work and worship. Among the newest of those bells was the one at St. Mary's Catholic Church, raised by the hands of German immigrants who had crossed an ocean seeking both opportunity and freedom to worship. Their church was modest but proud, a wooden structure with its sanctuary upstairs and classrooms below. It had stood for less than a year. No one knew how quickly it would fall. On the evening of June 2nd, 1860, the air lay heavy over the bluffs. Farmers later said the birds had gone silent. Mothers hurried children indoors without quite knowing why. To the west, clouds twisted into a dark and unnatural shape. Here is an excerpt from the diary of a parishioner, Anna.
June 2nd, 1860, just before I joined my family for supper. The air feels strange tonight. Even the river looks still, like it is holding its breath. Johann says a storm is coming, but I have known storms all my life, and this feels different. I hurried the children inside and shut the windows tight. From our yard, I could see the cross atop St. Mary's against the sky. I said a prayer without thinking why.
Anna also said the wind came first, not in gusts, but in a rising roar, like a train rushing where no tracks lay. Dust spun through the streets. Then came hail, hard as thrown stones. People ran for cellars, for doorways, for anywhere that felt like shelter. And then the funnel descended. It tore through the western part of Alton with merciless speed. Fences vanished. Roofs lifted as though made of paper. Church steeples bent and snapped like matchsticks. Here is another account taken from the Journal of Thomas, who was a carpenter and parish member.
This was the June 3rd, 1860 into my diary. I helped build St. Mary's with my own hands. I remember setting the beams of the upper floor where Father said Mass. Last night I watched from the storm cellar as the sky turned green and the wind screamed like a living thing. This morning I walked to the church grounds. I wish I had not. There's no church. Only splintered boards and broken bricks were scattered like kindling. The bell lies in the mud. I picked up a piece of the railing from the stair and could not stop shaking.
Miraculously, the town did not count its losses and lives as heavily as it might have. But homes were wrecked, businesses shattered, and churches, symbols of stability, brought low. At St. Mary's, parishioners gathered in silence before the ruins. Here is the next entry in the diary of Anna.
June 4th, 1860. We stood where the altar had been. The children did not speak. Father prayed aloud, though his voice broke. The men say the debt for the church is not yet paid. Some wept at this, not from money alone, but from the thought that we built a house for God, and it has been taken from us. Yet Father says, the church is not the wood, it is the people. I am trying to believe him.
Letters went out from Alton in the weeks that followed. They were sent eastward to larger cities, to dioceses with deeper pockets, to anyone who might help our frontier parish rise again. Coins came in envelopes. Promises came in ink. Hope returned slowly, like grass after fire. Another entry in the diary of Thomas is simply dated July, 1861. A little over a year after the storm.
Today we marked the ground for a new church. Smaller perhaps, and plainer, but stronger. I drove the first stake myself. My son asked if another storm would knock it down. I told him, maybe, but we will build again if it does. That is what we do here.
By December 1862, a new St. Mary's stood where the wreckage once lay. It would not be the last church the parish built, nor the grandest, but it was the one raised from loss, from faith tested by wind and sky. The tornado of 1860 faded into history, as storms do. Yet in the memory of the parish, it became something else, not only a tale of destruction, but of a people who refused to let their faith be carried away on the wind. And long after the splintered boards had turned to dust, the story remained. The storm took their church. It did not take their courage.
It's such a fascinating story. Alton was just a quiet river town in 1860, perched high on the bluffs above the Mississippi. Church bells had rung that morning at St. Mary's, calling families to prayer, just as they had so many Sundays before. No one could have guessed that by nightfall, their beloved church would lie in splintered ruin. The sky darkened with an unnatural fury. Winds screamed through Alton's streets, tearing roofs from homes and sending debris whirling like leaves. Then came the tornado, sudden, violent, unstoppable. When it struck St. Mary's, the church that had stood as a symbol of faith and community was ripped apart in moments. Walls collapsed, windows shattered. The very place where baptisms, weddings, and funerals had bound generations together was reduced to wreckage. But if the storm tested their faith, it didn't break it. In the days that followed, parishioners didn't scatter, they gathered. Among broken beams and scattered bricks, they prayed. Then they got to work. Families who had lost homes still showed up to clear debris. Laborers gave time they couldn't afford. Mothers cooked for workers. Children carried nails and water. Piece by piece, heartbreak turned into determination. Out of the destruction rose a second St. Mary's Church. Not just a building, but a declaration: we are still here. The new church stood as a testament to grit, sacrifice, and unshakable faith on the bluffs of Alton. It wasn't just rebuilt with lumber and stone, but with hope. And yet, this was only one chapter. Because the story of St. Mary's didn't end with that second church. More trials, more triumphs, more moments where a small parish in a river town would be called to rise again. So if this special report stirred your curiosity, and you want to uncover what happened next in the incredible journey of St. Mary's, let us know at the Jelly Bean Media Group. Write us a note in the comments and request a follow-up special report. You can also contact us at jellybeanmediagroup.com. Trust us, the storm was only the beginning. Thank you for joining us. For the Jelly Bean Media Group, I'm Douglas Russell.